The sleek silhouette of a Rolls-Royce Phantom cut through the morning fog blanketing Silicon Valley. Behind its tinted windows, Marcus Chen massaged his temples, trying to ease the tension that had become his constant companion. The digital display on his platinum Patek Philippe showed 6:30 a.m. another sleepless night spent watching his wife Sarah's peaceful breathing, wondering if it was all an act. "Your 7 a.m. board meeting has been moved to the downtown office," Mr. Chen, his AI assistant's voice purred through the car's speakers. Marcus barely registered the words, his mind replaying last night's charity gala. Sarah had been radiant in her emerald dress, charming everyone with her genuine warmth and artistic insights. Too genuine? He'd caught snippets of whispered conversation. She's half his age and must be nice marrying a billionaire. At 45, Marcus had built Chentech Solutions from a garage startup into a $50 billion empire. Every decision, every partnership, every acquisition had been calculated and vetted. But 8 months ago, he'd done something completely irrational. He'd followed his heart and married Sarah Collins, a 32-year-old art teacher he'd met at a community center fundraiser. "Sir," his driver's voice interrupted his thoughts. "We've arrived." Marcus stepped out into the crisp morning air, straightening his Tom Ford suit. The gleaming Chentech tower rose before him, its innovative architecture a testament to his vision. Inside, an army of executives and engineers worked to maintain his technological empire. But lately, the empire felt hollow. Sarah had brought color into his monochrome world of spreadsheets and profit margins. A passion for teaching art to underprivileged children had touched something long dormant in his soul. Her small apartment, filled with canvases and the scent of oil paints, had felt more like home than his sprawling mansion. When she'd agreed to marry him, he'd felt truly fortunate for the first time in his life. But doubt was a persistent virus, infecting every memory, every moment. The prenup she'd signed without hesitation, was it just a clever play? Her insistence on continuing her volunteer work a calculated move to maintain her image? The way she avoided expensive gifts reverse psychology. Standing in his top-floor office, Marcus stared at a small photograph on his desk. It showed Sarah laughing, paint smudged on her cheek, teaching a child to hold a brush. His fingers traced the frame as an idea took root, dangerous, perhaps unethical, but irresistible. "Dr. Thompson," he spoke into his phone, "remember that contingency plan we discussed? I want to move forward. Stage the accident tonight. Make it look convincing." He paused, watching the fog dissipate over the bay. "It's time to find out if my wife really loves me, or if she's perfected the art of deception." As he ended the call, Marcus felt a strange mix of guilt and determination. By this time tomorrow, he would be paralyzed from the waist down, and Sarah's true colors would finally be revealed. The stage was set for a test that would either mend his fractured trust or confirm his darkest fears. The sleek silhouette of a Rolls-Royce Phantom cut through the morning fog blanketing Silicon Valley. Behind its tinted windows, Marcus Chen massaged his temples, trying to ease the tension that had become his constant companion. The digital display on his platinum Patek Philippe showed 6:30 a.m. another sleepless night spent watching his wife Sarah's peaceful breathing, wondering if it was all an act. "Your 7 a.m. board meeting has been moved to the downtown office," Mr. Chen, his AI assistant's voice, purred through the car's speakers. Marcus barely registered the words, his mind replaying last night's charity gala. Sarah had been radiant in her emerald dress, charming everyone with her genuine warmth and artistic insights. Too genuine. He'd caught snippets of whispered conversation. She's half his age and must be nice marrying a billionaire. At 45, Marcus had built Chentech Solutions from a garage startup into a $50 billion empire. Every decision, every partnership, every acquisition had been calculated and vetted. But 8 months ago, he'd done something completely irrational. He'd followed his heart and married Sarah Collins, a 32-year-old art teacher he'd met at a community center fundraiser. "Sir," his driver's voice interrupted his thoughts. "We've arrived." Marcus stepped out into the crisp morning air, straightening his Tom Ford suit. The gleaming Chentech tower rose before him, its innovative architecture a testament to his vision. Inside, an army of executives and engineers worked to maintain his technological empire. But lately, the empire felt hollow. Sarah had brought color into his monochrome world of spreadsheets and profit margins. Her passion for teaching art to underprivileged children had touched something long dormant in his soul. Her small apartment, filled with canvases and the scent of oil paints, had felt more like home than his sprawling mansion. When she'd agreed to marry him, he'd felt truly fortunate for the first time in his life. But doubt was a persistent virus, infecting every memory, every moment. The prenup she'd signed without hesitation, was it just a clever play? Her insistence on continuing her volunteer work a calculated move to maintain her image? The way she avoided expensive gifts, reverse psychology. Standing in his top-floor office, Marcus stared at a small photograph on his desk. It showed Sarah laughing, paint smudged on her cheek, teaching a child to hold a brush. His fingers traced the frame as an idea took root, dangerous, perhaps unethical, but irresistible. "Dr. Thompson," he spoke into his phone, "remember that contingency plan we discussed? I want to move forward, stage the accident tonight. Make it look convincing." He paused, watching the fog dissipate over the bay. "It's time to find out if my wife really loves me, or if she's perfected the art of deception." As he ended the call, Marcus felt a strange mix of guilt and determination. By this time tomorrow, he would be paralyzed from the waist down, and Sarah's true colors would finally be revealed. The stage was set for a test that would either mend his fractured trust or confirm his darkest fears. 3 months into his charade, Marcus noticed the first signs that something was amiss. Sarah's wedding ring, a 5-carat diamond he'd specially commissioned, had been replaced by a simple gold band. When he asked about it, she'd kissed his forehead and murmured something about it being too heavy while helping with his physical therapy. But he'd seen the receipt from Winston's jewelry in her coat pocket. She'd sold it. One by one, her precious pieces disappeared: the sapphire earrings he'd given her for Christmas, the Cartier bracelet from their honeymoon in Paris, even her grandmother's vintage pearls. Each sale was conducted quietly, without explanation. Marcus found himself lying awake at night, his guilt warring with a new kind of suspicion. What could she need money for when their accounts remained untouched? Then came the late-night disappearances. "I'm just getting some fresh air in the garden," she'd say, but from his window, Marcus watched her slip into the guest house at the far end of their property. The building had been empty since their marriage, but now lights flickered behind its curtained windows until dawn. Strange delivery trucks arrived during the day: art supplies, according to the labels, but far more than Sarah would need for her occasional painting. "She's been making regular withdrawals from her personal account," his private investigator reported. "Small amounts, but consistent. All in cash." The man hesitated. "Sir, would you like me to follow her?" Marcus declined, his stomach churning. He'd started this deception to test her loyalty, but her mysterious behavior was testing his trust all over again. The irony wasn't lost on him. During their daily therapy sessions, he began to notice other changes. Sarah's hands, once perfectly manicured, were now rough with calluses. Paint stained her clothes, but not the delicate oils she usually used: industrial primers and wall paint. She'd come to bed exhausted, sometimes still wearing her work clothes, only to disappear again before sunrise. The guilt gnawed at him constantly now. He watched her sell her beloved first-edition books, the small art collection she'd curated before their marriage, even her car, replacing the luxury SUV with a modest used van. Each sacrifice was made without complaint, but he caught her sometimes, staring at old photos with tears in her eyes. "I'm thinking of renting a small studio," she mentioned one evening, helping him into bed, "just for a few hours each week, to keep up with my art." "We have plenty of space here," he protested, wondering if this was finally her breaking point, her need for escape. She smiled, that same warm smile that had first captured his heart. Sometimes creativity needs its own space to breathe. Her phone buzzed another late-night message, and she glanced at it quickly, her expression changing to one he couldn't quite read. One night, pretending to sleep, Marcus watched her pack a small bag: paint brushes, her laptop, and oddly, several sets of new bed sheets. She kissed his forehead gently before leaving, whispering, "I'll be back before you wake up." The temptation to follow her was overwhelming. Using the mobility he wasn't supposed to have, he could easily discover what she was hiding. But something held him back, perhaps the same instinct that had made him fall in love with her in the first place, the sense that she was different, special, genuine. Dr. Thompson visited regularly, maintaining their charade with professional precision. During one checkup, he gave Marcus an unusually serious look. "Sir, I'm beginning to have concerns about this experiment. The psychological impact of prolonged deception." "But just a little longer," Marcus interrupted, thinking of the mysterious activities in the guest house, the sold jewelry, the late-night disappearances. I need to understand what's happening. But his resolve was cracking. Every morning, Sarah greeted him with sincere affection, her exhaustion hidden behind loving smiles. She'd transformed their home, their lives, without a single complaint about the burden he'd become. The weight of his deception pressed against his chest like a stone. Then came the phone call he wasn't meant to hear. "The contractors can finish this week if we push," Sarah whispered from the hallway. "Yes, I know it's over budget. I'll figure something out. Maybe my grandmother's painting." She paused, listening. "No, he doesn't know. I can't tell him yet. Not until everything's perfect." The words hung in the air like poison. Marcus lay in bed, his mind racing through possibilities, each darker than the last. What was she planning? Why the secrecy? Had his test of her loyalty revealed something far more complex than simple gold digging? That night, as Sarah slipped out yet again, Marcus made his decision. Tomorrow he would discover what was happening in the guest house. Tomorrow he would face the consequences of his deception, whatever they might be. He didn't sleep at all, watching the lights in the guest house burn until dawn, wondering if his need to test her love had pushed her away in ways he never imagined. Outside his window, a moving truck pulled up to the guest house, the largest one yet. Sarah directed the workers with practiced efficiency, her face animated as she gestured toward the building. What secrets lay behind those walls? What had his wife been planning all these months while he tested her love with lies? Marcus Chen, the man who had built a tech empire on calculated risks, felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine fear of what tomorrow would bring. The autumn night air bit through Marcus's jacket as he wheeled himself silently across the mansion's grounds. After months of pretense, the wheelchair felt foreign beneath his capable hands. Sarah had left minutes ago, her silhouette disappearing into the guest house where warm light spilled from every window. Tonight he would finally discover the truth. As he approached, voices drifted through the evening air, not just Sarah's but others, young and excited. He maneuvered around to a side window, his heart pounding. The sight inside stopped his breath. The guest house had been transformed. Gone were the dusty furniture and forgotten artifacts of wealth. In their place, a bright, open studio space bloomed with color and life. Easels lined the walls, each attended by a child in a wheelchair or using mobility aids. Art supplies filled custom-built, accessible shelves, and in the center of it all stood Sarah, paint splattered and radiant. Remember, she was saying to a young girl struggling to hold a brush with partially paralyzed hands, art isn't about perfection. It's about expression. About showing the world how you see it. She guided the girl's hand gently, helping her create a bright stroke across the canvas. Beautiful. See how the color tells your story. Marcus watched, transfixed, as Sarah moved from student to student. Each child received her full attention, her encouragement tailored to their specific needs. Some used specially modified brushes she must have designed herself. Others worked with digital tablets mounted on wheelchair-accessible stands, equipment he recognized from recent delivery invoices. MS. Sarah called a teenage boy with leg braces. "Can I show you my finished piece?" Sarah hurried over, her face lighting up at the canvas. "Jason, this is incredible. Your perspective on living with disability, it's exactly what we need for the gallery opening." Gallery opening? Marcus leaned closer, his wheelchair squeaking slightly. A large banner hung on the far wall: Breaking Barriers Art Therapy Center for Children with Disabilities, grand opening next week. The pieces fell into place: the sold jewelry, the late nights, the mysterious deliveries. Sarah hadn't been planning an escape, she'd been building a sanctuary. A small gasp made him turn. Sarah stood in the doorway, her eyes wide. For a moment they stared at each other, the weight of unspoken truths hanging between them. "I think," she said softly, "we need to talk." Inside her studio, after the children had gone home, Sarah showed him everything. The accessible art stations she'd designed based on research and consultation with occupational therapists. The gallery space where her students' work would be displayed and sold to fund scholarships. The small medical room equipped for emergencies. "I couldn't tell you," she explained, hands twisting in her lap. "Not because I didn't trust you, but because after your accident, I wanted to give you time to heal before taking on another project. And I wanted to prove I could do this myself, not just as Marcus Chen's wife." Marcus felt the truth burning in his throat. Sarah, I sold my jewelry because this meant more to me than diamonds, she continued. These kids, they remind me of my brother. Your brother? There, Tommy. He was paralyzed in a car accident when I was 12. Art therapy helped him find purpose again, gave him back his joy. He died 5 years ago, but she gestured around the studio. His spirit is in every corner of this place. The weight of his deception crushed Marcus's chest. Here he'd been testing her love while she channeled her pain into creating something beautiful, something meaningful. That's why I fell in love with you, she said, touching his hand. Not your money, not your success. You listened when I talked about Tommy, about art therapy. You understood that some things matter more than profit margins. Marcus couldn't bear it anymore. With tears streaming down his face, he stood up from the wheelchair. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus, I can walk, he confessed, his voice breaking. I've always been able to walk. The accident, the paralysis, it was all a test. I had to know if you loved me or my money. I had to be sure. He expected her to scream, to rage, to leave. Instead, she sank into a chair, her face a mix of emotions he couldn't read. All this time, she whispered, while I was building this place, inspired by your struggle, it was a lie. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I was a fool. A distrusting, paranoid fool who couldn't see that the very things that made me doubt you, your kindness, your authenticity, your heart, were the reasons I fell in love with you in the first place. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks as she looked around her studio. Do you know what hurts the most? Not the lie itself, but that you watched me pour my soul into this place, watched me try to create something meaningful from our pain, and still didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. Marcus fell to his knees before her, taking her paint-stained hands in his. You're right. I was wrong, so terribly wrong. I let my fears poison the most beautiful thing in my life. But Sarah, what you've built here, it's extraordinary. Not just the center, but the hope you've given these children, the purpose you've created from what you thought was our shared tragedy. She pulled her hands away, standing to walk to the window. Outside, the garden they'd planned to make wheelchair accessible lay half-finished in the moonlight. I kept thinking, she said quietly, that when the center was ready, it would give you hope. Show you that disability doesn't define you. She turned back to him, her eyes bright with tears and something else, determination. You want to make this right? Anything, he breathed. Name it. Then help me make this center everything it can be. Not with your money, though, we'll need that too, but with your time, your heart. Show these kids that success isn't about what you can or can't do physically, but about who you choose to be as a person. In that moment, watching his wife stand amid the dreams she'd built from what she thought was their shared pain, Marcus Chen, billionaire, tech mogul, and foolish man, finally understood the true meaning of wealth. 1 year after the night of revelations, the Breaking Barriers Art Therapy Center had become something neither Marcus nor Sarah could have imagined alone. The simple guest house studio had expanded into a state-of-the-art facility serving hundreds of children with disabilities across Silicon Valley. But more remarkable than the center's growth was the transformation of its founders. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, the kids would squeal with delight as Marcus rolled in, now in a wheelchair by choice, to teach his popular tech art class. He'd adapted coding and digital design tools for various disabilities, helping students create everything from AI-generated art to 3D printed sculptures. His initial penance had become his passion. Remember, he'd tell his students, limitations breed innovation. The irony of these words wasn't lost on him. His greatest innovation had come from acknowledging his own limitations of trust and understanding. Sarah's forgiveness hadn't come easily. It had been earned through countless honest conversations, through Marcus's dedication to the center, and through his willingness to be vulnerable in ways his wealth had always protected him from. She'd made him experience life from the perspective of their students, insisting he use a wheelchair for his volunteer hours. Not as punishment, she'd explained, but to understand what you pretended to know. The experience had humbled him profoundly. He'd learned to see the world through different eyes, not just physically, but emotionally. The children's resilience, their joy in creating despite their challenges, showed him daily what real strength looked like. Their marriage, tested by his deception, had emerged stronger through radical honesty. Sarah had taken over Chentex's charitable foundation, expanding the art therapy program to hospitals and rehabilitation centers across the country. Her vision, combined with Marcus's business acumen, created a model that other organizations rushed to emulate. "You know what's funny?" Sarah said one evening as they watched a student exhibition at the center. "Your lie led to something true, something beautiful." Marcus squeezed her hand, watching as a young girl in a wheelchair proudly showed her parents the digital animation she'd created in his class. "I was looking for proof of your love in all the wrong places," he admitted. "It was always there in how you see the world, in how you help others see it too." The center had become their shared mission, but it was more than that. It was a daily reminder that trust, like art, wasn't about perfection. It was about allowing yourself to be seen, flaws and all. Marcus's billions had built an empire, but Sarah had shown him how to build something far more valuable, a legacy of genuine impact. They still had their struggles. Sarah would sometimes grow quiet when reminded of his deception. Marcus still battled moments of insecurity, but they faced these challenges together with the same dedication they brought to their work at the center. As they left the exhibition that evening, a new student stopped them. "Mr. Chen," the boy said, "my dad says you're a billionaire. Why do you come here in a wheelchair to teach us?" Before Marcus could respond, Sarah squeezed his hand. He looked at his wife, then back at the boy. "Because," he said, "some things are worth more than money. Like learning to see the world through others' eyes. Like understanding that our biggest limitations aren't physical, they're the ones we put on our hearts. Test deceptions can lead us, unexpectedly, to our deepest truths." Sarah leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. Above them, the center's new sign glowed softly, breaking barriers where every story finds its canvas. It wasn't just their story anymore, it belonged to every child who found hope within these walls, every family that discovered new possibilities, every heart that learned to see beyond its own limitations. In the end, Marcus realized, love wasn't something you tested, it was something you built, day by day, truth by truth, together. Today, the Breaking Barriers Art Therapy Center stands as more than just a testament to love and redemption. It's become a beacon of hope in Silicon Valley, where tech billionaires and venture capitalists now regularly volunteer alongside Marcus Chen. The center's success has inspired similar programs in 20 cities across the country, each one breaking down barriers between wealth and purpose, ability and creativity, fear and trust. Marcus and Sarah still walk the center's halls together, him sometimes in a wheelchair, now by choice, to better connect with their students. Their story, which began with doubt and deception, has transformed into a powerful reminder that true love isn't measured by tests or trials, but by the willingness to be vulnerable, to grow, and to turn personal challenges into opportunities to help others. As Sarah often tells their new students, every masterpiece begins with a single stroke of courage for her and Marcus. That stroke came in different forms: her courage to build something meaningful from pain, his courage to finally trust in love that asked for nothing but offered everything.